Hello and welcome to Kumza Africa Amplified, reverberating all across Africa and beyond. It is a pleasure to have you with us here on this platform as we discuss vital issues shaping the African continent. In this episode, I present to you the former president of Botswana, the peaceful nation of Botswana, the former president, His Excellency Ian Khama. He joins me exclusively on this platform in this episode as we talk about various topical issues happening across the African continent. I hope you will enjoy the conversation. Former President, greetings to you and welcome to Kumza Africa Amplified.
Thank you very much and you're welcome.
But you and I are having this conversation on the back of a glorious moment, a proud moment for Botswana, all thanks to the Olympics golden boy, Letsile Tebogo. What do you make of Letsile Tebogo's achievements at the recent Paris Olympics, former president?
I think it's incredible that we have been able to produce somebody like him who has made us so proud. After so many years, we've obviously competed at that level in the Olympics on many occasions, and we've always come so close to getting the medal in various track events. But for it to have happened this time round in Paris, we were extremely proud that he's the first ever one of our citizens to have got a gold medal, and also the first African to have got a gold medal in that particular event. So bringing all those things together has made us, and I hope the continent, very proud.
Yeah, a remarkable achievement indeed, former president. It was nice to see Botswana giving him a hero's welcome. But you have been quite busy, former president, since you left office. There are so many things that you are doing at the moment. You are involved in so many projects, empowerment projects, and also doing some philanthropic work across the African continent. When you look at the state of the African continent, former president, what comes to mind?
That is a very loaded question, very loaded, because I think you're asking it because you are aware that we are not in a particularly good place as a continent. We have got so many conflicts raging around, from north to south, east and west. We see military coups, we see what's going on in the Sudan, and the displacement of so many innocent people as a result of these conflicts. There just never ever seems to be an end to this kind of these tragedies that have been on a burden on our shoulders for decades upon decades. And it's just a shame that we seem to struggle in some cases, not in all cases, but in some cases with the kind of leadership that we have on the continent, which is actually causing a lot of these conflicts to happen. Where you have a situation where our people, and when you look at our natural resources, we look at our human resources, the people are so vibrant. They've got so much initiative, amongst the best in the world when you talk about vibrancy and enthusiasm. And yet they are let down in several cases by the people who lead them. And that is really what is dragging our continent back. So it's very, for me, very depressing, very discouraging that we don't seem to see light at the end of the tunnel in terms of building our nations, the economies, building a democracy to make it truly reflect what is the expectation of the people. And in fact, we seem to be in decline in many instances rather than moving forward.
Mm-hmm. But what needs to be done, former president, to stabilize the situation?
You know, one would have thought that would be a coming together of leaders to be able to sit down and say, look, let's take stock of where we are. Let's take stock of where we want to go. We come out with all these wonderful visions. Vision 2063, Vision 36, Vision this, Vision that. We have any number of regional groupings, meetings of leaders, whether it's at continental level, whether it's at regional level. But at the end of the day, where has it taken us? We don't seem to have progressed. And really, at the end of the day, we shouldn't be trying to look outside to look for the solutions. The solution comes from within us, within ourselves. And I don't know whether it will take even more time that when we get future generations of people and get away from this incumbency that we have now, people who want to be lifelong heads of state or lifelong presidents in their 90s and in their 80s and not give way to younger and more progressive thinking people. That's only, I think, over time that is going to happen. The problem is that some of these older ones are the ones leaving a bad example for those coming up. And therefore we seem to be stuck in this trench, this deep pit that we're unable to get out of.
Mm-hmm. But talking about regional groupings that are trying to stabilize the situation across the African continent, former president, just recently the SADC 44th summit was held in Zimbabwe, and one of the resolutions taken was a call for member states to implement the SADC regional humanitarian appeal in response to the El Nino-induced drought and floods that are causing problems across the continent. Former president, when you look at the outcomes of this particular summit, are you encouraged by what regional leaders here on the region are doing in resolving some of the problems that you are talking about?
You know, you'll always get what would appear to be positive resolutions and outcomes from summits. But at the end of the day, is what is resolved ever implemented and put in place? That is our downfall. I mean, if I come back to the issue of democracy, there's a SADC protocol on the conduct of free and fair elections. And there are some countries which violate that every single time they have an election. And then what happens? What does the summit do about that? Those people are defaulting. What is being done about the fact that in several instances, we are now in deficit when it comes to democracy? So all those things are well and good and well intentioned, but you never see anything that is coming about in terms of implementing those resolutions. So you need to go right back to the very first protocols that were put in place, right through, and see that is it incumbency which is actually the threat to being able to take the region and the continent forward, because some people just want to entrench themselves, and once they are there, even if they've got limited term limits, during the time that they're in office, they just totally abuse, in some cases, not in all cases, but they abuse their power and what they're supposed to do for the benefit of their citizens.
Mm-hmm. Now, given what you are saying, former president, some are saying that SADC has to be restructured in order to be effective to deliver the desired results that you are talking about. Do you share this sentiment?
It doesn't necessarily have to be restructured. Everything from time to time needs renewal, needs restructuring, not just this organization. The starting point for anything is to implement what you already have, is to consolidate what you have agreed to do, to undertake your commitments. If that isn't done, you can do any amount of restructuring, and if the restructuring plans themselves are not themselves implemented, you're just putting one restructuring effort on top of the other. It's not going to work until you address the issue of mindset amongst the leadership.
Mm-hmm. But what role should young people play, former president? Are we doing enough, in your view, to empower young people to play a meaningful role in bringing about a positive change on the continent?
You know, again, we pay lip service to the role of young people. We pay lip service to the role of women. But then let's look on the ground and see if it's actually happening. Ask the young people themselves if they see that there's any future or any hope in their lives. Have things changed in the last 5-10 years, or even those who have emerged from being youth now being middle-aged people, and the new ones coming along? Have they themselves experienced any change? Do they have any hope? Just go out and ask them that in this particular country or that particular country, what do you see as your future? Do you see your opportunities opening up beyond what they used to be? That is where you'll get the answer from. But then when you have, like I said, a situation where you have people who have been in office 15, 20, 30 years, where's the moving aside for the young people? They seem to think that they are the only ones, when there's so much opportunity, who should be God's gift to their countries, and therefore not prepared to make way for younger people. So this is the challenge that we have. We do need younger blood and fresh ideas when we talk about how and how far and where we want our continent to go. And until that happens, we're just going to be stuck where we are.
Talking about being stuck, former president, one of the problems facing the continent is the issue of sovereign debt, the issue of public debt payments. This issue is hobbling many nations here on the African continent. We see the results, we see the knock-on effect, people taking to the streets as a result of the high cost of living problem, which is a knock-on effect resulting from this problem. What do you think should be done, in your view, by African nations that are facing this problem to relieve themselves of this burden of public debt payments?
It's all about prudent financial management, where there are certain things which you can consider are what you'd call best international practice. And there are some things which should be homegrown in terms of how we want to run our economies. But the thing is that it boils down to governance at the end of the day. It boils down to leadership. The thing we've been talking about right from the beginning of this interview, that's where it begins, and that's where it will end. And unless those issues are addressed, what you're talking about, the debt burden, is just going to continue being a drain on our resources. And what we have seen, the protests that we have seen in certain countries in recent times on the continent, is just a measure of how we see that the proper financial management is not taking place, where there is abuse and where you have corruption is also bleeding the state of resources and then forcing governments to feel that they have to go to the population through taxes or other types of levies to try to build up financial resources to address those kind of problems. And the poor suffering people who are already overly taxed and they paying through high cost of living are just going to say, no, enough is enough. I know some of this high cost of living may not be entirely homegrown. Some of it is imported, some things that we have no control over. But by and large, a lot of it is also self-inflicted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is a problem that is threatening economic growth here on the African continent, and also threatening the sustainable development goals, isn't it, former president? Because these payments that we are talking about, they go into billions, if not trillions of dollars, isn't it?
Oh yes, you're quite right. And sometimes the burden is so big and so deep that you just don't see any hope of ever overcoming it. And then what they tend to do is that as they get deeper into it, they go and ask for more loans. And that just makes the situation, worse. It just makes it one problem on the other. Even in people's lives, people, I know several people who will go, they'll take loans, they can't pay back the loans, they go and get loans to pay off loans, and it's just a never-ending cycle.
What did you do, former president, during your time in office to avoid this problem?
What we made, the most important thing when I talked about the issue of prudent financial management, is that once you've worked out what your likely income is going to be for a coming financial year, you say, fine, this is what we expect from revenues that are going to come into the government. These are the various projects, whether they are under recurrent or development budget, that needs to be implemented. And then you allocate the resources that you're expecting to come according to those priorities. And the thing is to come up with priorities, that what are the most important things for the nation. And then you ensure that as you allocate funds, you only allocate within what you can afford. You don't try, you avoid as much as possible having a deficit. And if anything, you always try to have some level of surplus at the end of the financial year, which would go into your foreign exchange reserves. So that when times are really bad, like when we had the economic downturn, when you've had things like COVID and what have you, there's something that you've set aside for a rainy day, which will be able to help you survive during those different times. So we had built up quite significant import cover lasting months for the country, always putting aside funds and not trying to spend everything that you would get from your revenues. Always put something aside and ensure that you keep within the budget. Always make sure you keep within the budget and you do not overexpend and get yourself into deeper trouble that way. And so it's all about financial discipline. Financial discipline, whether it's personal self-financial discipline or state discipline, that is what you have to do. And unfortunately, that it doesn't happen. There's a lot of wastage that takes place in governments. There's a lot of waste. And what the principle should be is trying to do more with less. Always try to do more with less. And that way you can't go wrong.
Let's talk about the movement of people across the continent, former president, because others have expressed concern with regard to the movement of goods and movement of people across the continent. What, in your view, should be done, former president, to remove the obstacles that are standing on the way of regional integration?
You see, you'll find that if you borrow the example from the EU, where they have free movement, and then the UK decided to pull out because they found that free movement was not actually in their interests. It depends what you're talking about with free movement. What are the objectives of free movement? If you're talking about intertrade, people, students who are going to be studying in other countries, you're talking about agricultural produce which is going to be sold across the borders, you're talking about airlines which can cross backwards and forwards between countries. You don't have to go through Europe to reach other parts of Africa from Africa. People who are going to be able to move to other countries, who are going to be able to contribute to the development of those countries, that is fine. But unfortunately, free movement sometimes comes with people who are just looking for economic opportunities and not able to add any value because you may, in other words, economic refugees. And then that poses a drain on the resources of other countries who are trying to find employment for their own people. And you've got others moving across the borders looking for the same employment and competing with your own citizens. That kind is not going to be much of a contribution. What will be contributory is people who are going to be free movement when it comes to imparting skills, sharing skills amongst people. Business people are looking for opportunities. So free movement, it's a two-edged sword. It's a two-edged sword in that, yes, it can have its benefits, but it can also have its downsides, and it has to be controlled. So there has to be a way of finding that the free movement allows for people to cross who are generally going to be able to come with skill sharing and other benefits, tourism, whatever, to the countries they're moving to. It shouldn't just be open-ended and just open for everybody to cross.
Is the Continental Free Trade Area Agreement a vehicle to achieve those objectives?
That is the idea, of course, but we'll see. I'm not in government now, as you're aware, so I don't really have the means to be able to monitor and test whether, since the agreement was signed, how well it is doing, and is it making progress.
Let's talk about the upcoming elections, former president, the elections that are happening in October. These are important polls, isn't it, former president? What kind of outcomes are you wishing for?
Oh, the outcome I'm wishing for, and the outcome that the majority of the citizens are working for, is for the incumbents to be thrown out of office because they have failed the nation terribly since they took office in 2018. So that is certainly an outcome that I hope for, to try to get Botswana back to what it used to be, and make us proud once again of the country that we used to live in, and the reputation that we had in terms of good governance, democracy, and abiding by the rule of law and human rights. That has all been thrown out of the window under the current regime. And so it is certainly my express wish and hope, as like I said, it is many others, to see this regime out of office.
And who would you like to see in the leadership position, former president, to bring Botswana back to its former glory?
Whoever the majority of voters vote for, other than the incumbent, I'll be very happy with.
Mm-hmm. Now, talking about leadership and what needs to be done, former president, let's talk about diamond, because a diamond plays such an important role in Botswana's economic growth, isn't it? You and I, we are having this conversation on the back of an historic discovery. The world's second largest diamond has been discovered in Botswana, former president. When you look at what is being done at the moment to leverage diamond in the country's development trajectory, are you encouraged? Are you optimistic?
You know, we've had a very beneficial relationship with, for example, De Beers, who we jointly with them, a government formed a company called Botswana, who are the biggest diamond operation in the country and even in the world, I would say. That diamond you referred to wasn't a diamond from one of their mines, but that particular mine has found quite significant sized diamonds in the past. So even though this one is the second biggest, it would be, I think, not too surprising from my point of view that it would have been found by that particular operation. But yes, indeed, the partnership has benefited us a lot. Our development trajectory over the years has been achieved a lot due to the diamonds and the beneficiation process that we had put in place over time. There were some difficulties recently between the Botswana government and De Beers in negotiating a new arrangement with De Beers. But that was because it was done by people who were inexperienced, people who didn't understand the importance of partnership, led by the incumbent president, and trying to get for themselves what the company wasn't prepared to offer. And I'm talking about from a personal point of view, their own personal gain. So things didn't go right on that score, and we have been struggling in recent times, as I believe it, from our revenues from diamonds. And the big threat now is that, one, you find people may not be that attached, especially the younger people, to diamonds as used to be the situation. And secondly, also synthetics, because you'll find that diamonds are able to be produced other than from mining, and those will always be a threat. That whatever goes into diamond mining, and the importance that when when a lady wears a diamond ring, she knows that it is a genuine diamond, and it's going to last her forever. And a synthetic thing, which is just something produced, which is man-made, doesn't have the same shine on it, if I can put it like that, as a genuine diamond. So it's all about the marketing to make it, attractive to people in that regard. But with the rise of synthetics, it certainly does pose a threat to genuine diamonds. So when you come up with these partnerships, when you're talking to people in the industry, trying to forge relationships with them, you've got to not be selfish about how you go about it. You've got to plan, not for now, you've got to plan for the future. So you mustn't try to get as much out of it as you can now, and not care about what would be the consequences leading on. And that's when any relationship like this, and that's how we used to do it in the past. But now it's not been done like that. So in the past, when we used to sit down and negotiate these things, we were planning for the future and future generations. And as I said, not for the now.
And of course, talking about the marketing side of things, there are also diamond certification processes involved as well, isn't it?
You know, when you had to ensure that when you look at diamonds which are being produced, that you have to ensure that where they are coming from, you know, it is a genuine product, and it's mined under conditions which are authentic. So it's a 50-50 situation. If you find that there's a disadvantage through certification, then you may request or want to see the thing being changed. But certainly during my period and the time before, the issue never really came up that I'm aware of, that the certification process was anything that impeded our ability to mine these diamonds and benefit from all the downstream activities that the diamond mining produced in our country. So I would not know. I've been out of office for 6 years, so I don't know whether there may have been things which have changed since I've been out of office that I cannot really speak to.
You have been out of office since 2018, and there are so many projects that you are involved in at the moment, including doing charity work and philanthropic work. What kind of a role a former president does philanthropic work play in terms of shaping the future of the African continent?
You know, it really just boils down to when you live in, I suppose it applies to every country, you have people, fellow citizens who are disadvantaged in society, who are not well off, who have got maybe some suffer from disabilities which are not of their making. So I think it's not just for our country, it's not just for Africa. I think it's for everybody to take up the mantle of ensuring that they look after, to the best of their ability, fellow citizens, fellow people, whether it's here or on the continent generally, to give them a lift up in their lives so that they are able to have dignity in the way that they live. And that is something that has always driven me. I did it when I was in office, pushing programs like that, and after I left office, even though the incumbent tried to prevent me from doing so.
Now, another global event that we are watching closely, former president, is the United Nations General Assembly that will be happening in New York in a few days' time. When you look at what needs to be on the agenda of this year's General Assembly, what should be the key priority issues that the African leaders should put on the agenda during this year's General Assembly?
There are about 2 or 3 things which I think are very important. Let's start with the United Nations Security Council. The composition of the Security Council, the role of the Security Council, and does it represent the democracy we always talk about? That Security Council is one of the most undemocratic institutions that you could ever have dreamt about. It is something that represents a bygone era. It is not reflective of today in terms of representation around the world. And as you know, countries in Africa have been asking for permanent representation on the Security Council. Well, there's that, and there's also the veto. The veto is the most undemocratic form that you could have in an institution like the United Nations, where one country can hold to ransom everybody. Take, for example, the situation that we see in the Palestinian states. You know, you'll find the General Assembly, which is the majority of countries, or all the countries represented there, will vote to have a Palestinian state. Again, you'll have the United Nations Security Council vote to have a Palestinian state, except one country, America, will veto. So one country can veto the whole thing. So you say, right, if you want a 2-state solution between Israel and the Palestinians. There's only two ways you're going to achieve that. One is that the two parties come together and negotiate that arrangement coming about. But we know that's never going to work because Israel, especially under this Netanyahu character, it will never happen. The Israelis, successive governments, have never been serious about a two-state solution. So when you know that's not going to happen, then the only other way it can come about is through United Nations Security Council resolution. And that has been blocked by the United States, who say that no, it should be negotiated between the two, yet they know very well that that won't happen. So they're actually complicit in ensuring that the Palestinians would never have a state. So when coming to that, the UN Security Council, that power of veto is so undemocratic and so unreasonable that I think the whole thing needs to be, overhauled. But it cannot be overhauled without the 5 permanent members agreeing to it. So all it needs, again, is one of them to veto, and we are stuck where we are. So it means that to see other countries coming in with the power of veto, which I'm against anyway, any country having the power of veto, I'm even not too happy about having permanent members either. This rotational method is what is a fair way of ensuring that when you bring in all the continents together, representing the world, that should be done. So I think that is the one thing. So I'm talking about two things there. I've talked about the Africa representation on the Security Council, which needs to be there. Africa needs to sit on the United Nations Security Council. Then there's the reform of the Security Council. And then the third thing is when you look at the Security Council, which is supposed to be responsible for peace and security on the world, but you have members, permanent members with the veto power, are the ones threatening and attacking other countries, like Russia is doing to Ukraine at the moment. And there they are, supposed to be promoting peace and security, and they are invading their neighbor. You'll see China as well, threatening Taiwan, and you could see other countries being brought into that thing. Do they not have the capacity as superpowers to be able to sit down and be superpower diplomats instead of using their military to always project their power? Why can't they project their power through diplomacy, and why do they always resort to threats of war and actually carry out war? So those are the things which I think need to be addressed. And lastly, let me just say, coming back to the issue of the Palestinians, I think it is a shame. It is disgusting. It is pathetic that all the countries in the world, the international community, can sit back and watch the killing of innocent people, as you see that's going on in Palestine today, I mean in Gaza in particular. That the very people who suffered from the Holocaust could be the same ones to be doing even more worse things to fellow human beings than what was done to them during the Second World War. There is just no excuse. This thing of, no, they've got the right of self-defense. Yes, of course, you have the right of self-defense. But does that translate into you behaving worse than your enemies when they invaded you on the 7th of October? When Netanyahu will go to the Golan Heights the other day, when about 12 children who were killed by a rocket, which probably came from Lebanon, but Hezbollah denied that it was them, to go and show sympathy for 12 children that were killed. But he and his forces are killing more than 12 children every single day as we speak. So those are the kind of things. It is only South Africa which stood up and took this matter to the International Court of Justice. And we are proud that it was an African country that actually said, no, this cannot be right. This needs to be challenged, and in the way they did. And countries, can you imagine, some countries wanted to point fingers at South Africa and criticize them for doing that, as if they were happy with what is going on in Gaza. So it is sickening that the world has come to that situation, and you can see the same happening in Sudan. the amount of killing that is going on, and has been going on for so long. In the DRC, it has been going on for so long.
Do you think the world has turned a blind eye to what is happening in Sudan?
It's forgotten. I mean, how often do you see it on your screens? Even the media, not just the world. I mean, the media, it's not there as it used to be. When it first started, the atrocities that were being carried out by both sides in Sudan. And there were those efforts at the beginning to try to bring the two parties to the table to stop this unnecessary slaughter of innocents. But, now it's just Ukraine, it's just Gaza. Africa, as usual, is not thought about much. Anything that happens on the continent, there'll be a little bit, and then it's all gone away. It happens very often that things that happen on the continent will reach the headlines for a day or two, and then it's all forgotten. So it's very sad that people who profess to be coming from countries which are either superpowers or democracies or whatever you want to call them, just become detached from what is happening in the rest of the world. But at the end of the day, they'll get affected. It will come and affect all of us at one stage, and they'll regret that they didn't intervene as they should to bring this kind of suffering to an end sooner rather than later.
Mm-hmm. But the incumbent Secretary General Antonio Guterres has been calling for these reforms, former president. How important has it been to see the incumbent Secretary General calling for these reforms?
He's one of the best United Nations Secretary Generals we have had, because he will talk out about things like reform. He has been very vocal about climate change as well, and what the harm it is doing to our planet. He's really a champion of that. He spoke out a lot about the Russian invasion of Ukraine. He spoke out a lot. He was very vocal about the atrocities that the Israelis are causing on the Palestinians. I take my hat off to him. But he's not the president of the world. He's the Secretary General of the United Nations. So he doesn't have a country, and everything, the way the UN works, it works with the countries agreeing on the approach that they should take. But his is an important voice. I'm not downplaying the importance of what he has to say. It is a very important voice. I just wish that there could be more leaders in this world like him as the UN Secretary General. And I think if he was somebody who was able to have the authority to intervene, to stop some of these things that are happening, to bring about the reforms that you've just referred to, we would be in a much better place internationally than we are now.
But are you getting a sense, former president, that the African continent is speaking with one voice at the United Nations?
It really depends on what is the subject matter you're talking about. When countries in Africa go to the UN, they are speaking, they'll be speaking for themselves. There'll be other issues where they'll come together and they will speak as a collective. So it really depends what the subject matter is that you'd be referring to. Because at the end of the day, they do go there, not as a bloc, they go there representing themselves, their own interests. And then there will also be issues of a collective nature that they will also agree on and raise at that body.
Now, as we wind up this conversation, former president, I would like to ask you about your wish, your hopes for the African continent. What is your wish for the African continent?
I just wish that our people can be allowed to reach their full potential. Whether it's we started off this conversation talking about sports. We talked about Tebogo and his gold medal. When you look at, if we take that subject matter, for example, sports, just look how many people from Africa represent other countries in the world outside of the African continent, because we have got the class, we've got the quality, we've got the ability in various number of fields, not just in sports, across the whole spectrum. They are there. But where are they? They have gone to other countries. Why? Why not stay in their own countries? And we've spoken about why, what the problems are in their own countries. So I would really wish that we could see the type of leadership which would give the ability for people on the continent to reach their full potential, for countries and their economies to reach their full potential. And Africa would take a place in this world that we would never expect, we've never seen before. Instead of always being the ones who are downtrodden, the ones who are always going around with the begging bowl, we would be the ones who would be able to say, people would be coming to us for our support, for our assistance, for whatever it is, other than us always going to them and looking for favors. So, and that will only come with the right leaders at the end of the day. We've got everything else in place. Like I said, the human resources there, the initiative, the energy, the vibrancy amongst our people is there. What we lack in a number of cases is just the right leadership, and we will get there.
Apart from philanthropic work that you are busy with at the moment, former President, what else preoccupies you?
Well, there's that. I'm involved in conservation. I'm involved in there's the Pan-African Heritage Museum, which is going to be built in Ghana. I'm also involved in the African Leadership Awards, which rewards top performers in various fields on the African continent. Currently, right now, I'm also involved a lot in politics back home, even though I'm not in the country. This advent of COVID has taught us so much how to communicate virtually, that it's almost like being at home, that you can achieve so much. So there's any number of things that I'm doing. There's never a dull moment for me in my life at the moment. So I'm doing all those things together, and it's keeping me very busy.
You were actually recognized with an award earlier this year.
Yes, I've had about yes, I've got I got a reward last year. It was in Rwanda. Then I've got 2 other awards here in South Africa. I've been able to go, and I've been invited. You know, like when I talk about in conservation, I was involved in conservation projects in Uganda, and recently I was also in Kenya. So yes, I have received those awards, about 3 in the last couple of years.
But how does it feel, former President, to be recognized for the work that you do?
It's very humbling and very motivating, because if you look at the issue of charitable work, if you look at conservation, you know, you can step down from politics or what have you, but you cannot step down from what is going on in the world. So people out there still need you to bring to focus the attention of the disadvantaged. We still have a planet that we need to look after. And therefore, my conservation work is also something which I'm very keen about. The Guardian Angel, Wildlife and Marine Trust is a new organization that we are setting up. It is being set up in South Africa, that I'm patron on. I was very privileged to have received an award in the UK recently, in London, again, to do with conservation. So that work will always need to be continued. You don't retire from doing charitable work to helping the disadvantaged in society, nor can you retire from trying to secure a bright future for the planet in terms of the fauna and flora. That work has to continue for as long as possible.
The work has to continue for as long as possible, former President. It has been such a pleasure hosting you on this platform. Thank you so much for making the time. Any last word?
The last word I would say to everybody is that the most important thing in life, one of the most important things, are whoever is the person standing next to you or sitting next to you. As long as you're people-centered, you cannot go wrong. And I think that is something that God has taught us, that we must always look out for each other. And as long as you respect other people and look out for them, then you will go far.
Former President of Botswana, Ian Khama, it has been such a pleasure.
Thank you very much, and the same to you. Look forward to the next time. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us exclusively to Kumza Africa Amplified, reverberating all across Africa and beyond. I hope you have enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. Thank you so much for joining us. Until next time, it's goodbye for now. Cheers.